A few days after that quiet evening in Caroline's living room, something between Caroline and Ethan had shifted. It was subtle, small glances, a softer tone in their voices, the way their conversations lingered a little longer than before. Neither of them talked about it outright, but both felt it. One Friday night, after a long week filled with exhaustion and restless thoughts, Caroline found herself walking down to the grocery store. The sun had already set, and the sky was a deep blue with stars beginning to peek through. The cool air carried a faint scent of jasmine from a neighbor's garden as she stepped out of her townhouse. She almost didn't notice Ethan's SUV parked quietly at the curb. "Hey," Kay called softly when he saw her. Carolyn smiled, a little breathless. "Kay?" He was closing the trunk of his car, holding a small box of tools he'd borrowed earlier that week. "Need a ride back?" Ethan asked. Caroline hesitated. She knew this was no ordinary question anymore. But she nodded. The car was warm when she slid inside, a welcome relief from the crisp evening air. Ethan started the engine and pulled smoothly onto the road. For a while, they drove in silence. The streets were quiet, with only the occasional sound of a dog barking in the distance or a car passing by. Then Ethan glanced over at Caroline. "You okay?" he asked gently. Caroline looked down at her hands, nervously twisting the hem of her shirt. "I don't know," she admitted. "I feel lost sometimes, like I'm stuck in a life that isn't mine." Ethan nodded slowly, as if he understood. "Completely. I feel that way too," he said. "Like I'm living someone else's story." Caroline looked up, meeting his eyes. There was something in them, something deep and real. "Do you think we're just afraid to be honest with ourselves?" she asked. Ethan smiled sadly. "Maybe. Or maybe we don't know what we really want." They drove on, the car filled with a quiet tension. It was the kind of tension that made you aware of every breath, every heartbeat as they pulled into the parking lot near Caroline's apartment complex. Ethan didn't reach for the door to let her out. Instead, he turned off the engine and looked at her with a softness that made her heart flutter. "Caroline," he began, voice low and steady, "there's something I've been meaning to say." She swallowed hard, suddenly nervous. "Julia and I," he continued, "we've been living in the same house, but not really together. I've felt alone for a long time, and when I'm with you, I feel something I haven't felt in years." Caroline's breath caught in her throat. "I know this is complicated," he said, "but I can't pretend anymore that everything is okay." She reached out and gently touched his hand. "Neither can I," she whispered. For a moment they sat there, hands touching, neither speaking. The silence was full of meaning, hope, fear, longing. Then Ethan leaned a little closer, just enough for her to feel his breath. But before anything else could happen, a car pulled into the parking lot, the headlights brightening the small space. Ethan pulled back quickly. Caroline's heart was pounding. "I should go," she said, voice trembling. Ethan nodded, his eyes searching hers. "Tomorrow?" he said softly. "Can we talk tomorrow?" She nodded. He opened the door and stepped out into the night. Caroline watched him go, the weight of what was happening settling over her like a blanket warm, heavy, and impossible to ignore. Inside her apartment, she sat by the window, staring out at the quiet street. The night felt alive with possibilities and pain all at once. She didn't know what would come next, but she knew one thing for sure. Her life was no longer predictable. The morning after that charged evening in the parking lot, Caroline woke up feeling the weight of what had happened the night before. The sunlight spilled softly through her bedroom window, but instead of comfort, it brought a strange mix of hope and uncertainty. Her mind was tangled in thoughts of Ethan, his quiet confession, the way his eyes searched hers. It's a brief moment when it seemed like everything might change. For years, Caroline had lived carefully. After her divorce, she had promised herself to stay safe, to avoid risks, emotional or otherwise. But now, with Ethan, the rules felt different. There was no clear path, no easy answers. Just a delicate thread connecting to lonely hearts, stretched, taut over a world that demanded caution. She tried to get through her day as usual, but the office felt stifling. Her colleagues' chatter, the constant buzz of emails, the fluorescent lights overhead, all seemed distant, irrelevant. She kept checking her phone, hoping for a message, a sign from Ethan. But there was nothing. Meanwhile, Ethan wrestled with his own turmoil. Julia was still in the picture, his wife, the woman he had once loved deeply, the person who shared his life and memories. He didn't want to hurt her, yet the emptiness between them was impossible to ignore. The truth was, his heart had quietly begun to drift away, pulled by an unexpected current toward Caroline. That afternoon, Caroline received a text message that made her heart skip. "Can we meet? There's something I need to say tonight." Replied immediately, "Yes, I'll be here." That evening, they agreed to meet at a small, quiet cafe near the edge of town. The place was cozy with dim lights and the soft hum of conversation. Perfect for a talk they both knew was important. When Caroline arrived, Ethan was already there, seated at a corner table, looking nervous but resolute. His usual calm was replaced by a raw honesty that made her stomach flutter. "Thank you for coming," he said, his voice low. "Of course," she replied, sitting down opposite him. They ordered coffee, but neither really tasted it. Instead, their eyes locked, searching for courage in each other's faces. Ethan took a deep breath. "I've been thinking a lot about us, about my marriage, and what I want. Julia and we're not the same anymore. I can't keep pretending." "Everything's fine," Carolyn nodded, feeling the familiar ache of shared pain. "I don't want to hurt her," he continued. "But I also can't deny how much you mean to me. You make me feel alive again." Her heart pounded, but she kept her voice steady. "I feel the same. It's scary, because everything's so uncertain. But being with you feels like a chance to be real." For a moment, they simply sat there, the weight of their words settling between them. Then Ethan reached across the table, gently taking her hand in his. "We have to be honest," he said. "With ourselves, with Julia, and with each other. No more hiding." Caroline squeezed his hand, a tear slipping down her cheek. "I'm ready to be honest." They talked late into the night, sharing hopes, fears, and the bittersweet reality that their journey wouldn't be easy. There were no guarantees, no promises of a fairy tale ending. But there was a quiet determination to try to find happiness, no matter the cost. As they left the cafe, the night air was cool and clear. Caroline felt a lightness she hadn't known in years, a fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, love could bloom again, even from the most unexpected places. Ethan walked her to her door, pausing just long enough to brush a soft kiss against her cheek. "Whatever happens," he whispered, "I'm here." Caroline smiled, her heart full. For the first time in a long time, she believed in new beginnings. It was one of those gray afternoons where the sky felt too close, heavy with something more than just weather. Caroline stood at the bus stop just outside her office building, her arms crossed tightly, her cardigan doing little against the sudden downpour. The wind blew rain sideways, dampening her jeans and soaking into her flats. She shivered, tugging her bag tighter against her side, silently cursing the one day she chose not to drive. Her phone buzzed once, then died in her hand, battery gone. She groaned, pressing the power button in vain. Her rideshare app had been acting up all day, and now she had no way to call anyone or even check the bus schedule. Typical. Caroline wasn't someone who asked for help easily. 35, independent, a little too proud for her own good. She had built a quiet life after her divorce 3 years ago. It wasn't glamorous, but it was stable, safe, predictable. She lived alone in a small townhouse on a suburban cul-de-sac in Maple Ridge, just north of Seattle. The kind of place where people mowed their lawns on Saturday mornings and smiled politely but didn't really talk. Except for Julia. Julia was the neighbor everyone noticed. Blonde, always put together, cheerful in a way that sometimes made Caroline feel tired just watching her. And Julia's husband Ethan was equally hard to read. He was handsome in a quiet, almost old-fashioned way. Broad shoulders, thoughtful eyes, always carrying a toolbox or fixing something in the yard. He seemed like the kind of man you only saw in movies, reliable, strong, always calm. Caroline had exchanged pleasantries with Ethan at block parties and neighborhood events. A few smiles, some small talk about weather and work. He was kind, but distant, like a book with the first few pages missing. So when a black SUV slowed down in front of the bus stop and the window rolled down to reveal Ethan behind the wheel, Caroline was surprised. "Hey," he said, his voice low and familiar. "You need a ride?" She hesitated, not because she didn't want help, but because it felt complicated. "It's pouring out here," he added. "Hop in. It's no trouble." She looked up and down the street. No buses in sight. No dry place to wait. And her phone was useless. She opened the door and climbed in. "Thanks," she said, shaking water from her sleeves. "You really didn't have to stop?" Ethan gave her a quick glance before pulling back onto the road. "I saw you standing there when I drove by earlier. Figured I'd circle back. Looks like you're having a rough day." She laughed softly. "That obvious?" "Just a guess. You usually don't look like someone caught in a thunderstorm." There was something gentle in his tone, not flirtatious, not intrusive. Just kind. The car smelled faintly of pine and coffee. The dashboard was clean, the seats warm. She exhaled slowly, finally relaxing. "Do you want me to take you home?" he asked. "Yeah, if you don't mind." "No problem," Julia mentioned. "You live just across from us." Caroline nodded. She felt a flutter in her stomach when she didn't like to acknowledge. She reminded herself, he's married. It's Julia's. This is just a ride. Still, the silence in the car settled in around them like a blanket. Not uncomfortable, just full. Full of thought she couldn't quite voice. "Thanks again," she said after a few minutes. "I know this was random," he shrugged, eyes on the road. "Sometimes random's good. Life gets too predictable." That made her pause. "Is that a bad thing?" she asked. Ethan smiled just barely. "Not always, but it can be." Lonely, his words hung in the air. Carolyn didn't respond, and neither did he. The radio played softly in the background, some classic song she half recognized, but the lyrics slipped past her. She looked out the window, watching the rain dance on the glass. But her mind wasn't on the weather anymore. Something about Ethan's presence stirred memories she had long buried, of late-night conversations, of feeling seen, of being close to someone who truly listened. Not just heard her words, but felt them. She had forgotten what that felt like. As they turned down their quiet street, the rain began to lighten. The clouds still hung low, but the worst of it had passed. Caroline felt a strange sense of calm, like she was waking up from something, or maybe just seeing her life in a slightly different light. When they pulled into her driveway, Ethan didn't speak right away. "You good?" he asked finally, eyes still forward. Caroline nodded. "Really? Thanks again." She reached for the door handle but paused. "You know," she said, her voice soft, "you're not what I expected." He turned to her slowly. "How do you mean?" She met his gaze, suddenly aware of how close they were in the quiet of the car. "I don't know. You seem different, like someone who's been carrying a lot, but still makes space for other people." Ethan didn't smile this time. His eyes held hers for just a moment too long. "Maybe I just recognized that in you," he said, and then, just like that, the moment was over. She stepped out of the SUV, pulling her cardigan tighter. The rain had stopped. Ethan waited until she was safely at her front door. Before backing out of the driveway and disappearing down the street, Caroline stood there, heart beating a little too fast. It was just a ride, just a kind gesture, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. Something she wasn't ready to name. Not yet, but she felt it. Just the same, the next day, Caroline found herself thinking about Ethan's quiet words on the drive home. His calm voice, the way he looked at her when he asked if she ever felt like she was living the wrong life, it all lingered in her mind. She tried to shake it off, telling herself it was just a coincidence, just two neighbors caught in a rainstorm. But deep down, she felt a spark she hadn't felt in a long time. Work was a blur that morning. Her boss's reminders, the endless emails, the ringing phone net all felt distant, like she was somewhere else. Caroline kept stealing glances at her phone, hoping for a message, a call, anything from Ethan. But there was nothing. That evening, as she packed up to leave, her phone buzzed suddenly. It was a message from Ethan. "Hey, I'm around your place. Need to grab something I left in my garage. Mind if I stop by for a minute?" Caroline's heart skipped. She hesitated, then typed back quickly. "Sure, wasn't like them to talk much, but maybe tonight was different." 20 minutes later, there was a soft knock on her front door. Caroline opened it to find Ethan standing there, raincoat still damp, his eyes tired but warm. "Hey," he said quietly. "Thanks for letting me come by," coarse Caroline replied, stepping aside to let him in. The house was cozy, small but full of light and warmth. They sat down in the living room, the air thick with unspoken things. Ethan held a small box in his hands, a few old tools and a couple of photographs. "Found some old memories," he said with a half smile. "Thought I'd sort through them." Caroline nodded, watching him. There was a sadness beneath his calm exterior, a quiet pain that didn't need words. They sat in silence for a while, the kind of silence that speaks volumes. Finally, Caroline broke it. "Ethan, you said last night that things have been complicated at home. Do you want to talk about it?" He looked at her then, really looked. His eyes held years of stories of love, disappointment, and loneliness. "Julia and I," he began slowly, "we're drifting. Not in a loud, dramatic way. No fights or shouting, just silence. Distance, like two people living parallel lives in the same house." Caroline swallowed, feeling a lump rise in her throat. "That sounds hard." "It is." Ethan's voice was steady, but sad. "I love her. I want to fix things. But sometimes love isn't enough, you know? Sometimes you need more than just memories and hopes." Caroline nodded, remembering her own heartbreak years ago. "I left my marriage because it felt like I was holding on to something that didn't exist anymore," she said softly. "Like I was pretending to be happy." Ethan reached out and gently touched her hand. "You're not pretending." She looked down at their hands, then back up into his eyes. That simple touch felt like a lifeline. For a moment, they sat like that, connected in a way neither expected. Then Ethan sighed and pulled his hand back. "I shouldn't be here," he said, shaking his head. "I don't want to make things worse." Caroline reached for his hand again, a little bolder this time. "Sometimes," she said, "just having someone listen is enough." He smiled, the kind of smile that reached his eyes, and for a moment, the weight between them lifted. As the evening wore on, they talked more about their dreams, regrets, and the strange loneliness that comes with being surrounded by people. But feeling invisible, Caroline realized how much she had missed having a true connection. Someone who saw her not as the woman next door, but as a person with hopes and fears. Ethan shared stories about his childhood, his work as a carpenter, and how he sometimes felt trapped by expectations he didn't choose. "You don't have to pretend with me," Caroline whispered. He looked at her, vulnerability clear in his gaze. "No," he said quietly, "I don't." As he left later that night, Caroline stood by the door, heart pounding. They weren't just neighbors anymore. Something fragile had begun between them. Quiet understanding that could either heal or hurt them both. And Caroline wasn't sure what would come next, but for the first time in a long time, she felt hope.